part 2 of our Ford special on Gone But Not Forgotten. Now, getting together all the Fords ever sold in India, we didn't expect this video to be this long, and that's why we have split it into 2 parts. The first is live, the link is out here. We've driven the Icon, the Figo, the Aspire and the Fiesta. And on this, the second part, we've driven the big Endeavours, the old Endeavour, the new Endeavour. We've got the Fusion, we've got the Mondeo, we also have the Mustang. This, as you all probably recognize, is the Ford Icon, but this is not where the Ford India story actually started. In fact, Ford started assembling cars in India before independence. They started in 1926 and they went on till 1953 because post-independence, when the whole nationalization kicked in, then they were, well, kicked out or asked to leave, but that's when they went away and they came back in 1995. That was in a 50-50 joint venture with Ford to make the Escort. Now, we tried really hard to get our hands on an Escort, but none seems to exist. So here are a few pictures. And in fact, I barely even drove an Escort because the Escort started and ended before my automotive journalism career even kicked off. In fact, I remember reading a long-term test report in Overdrive before I joined Overdrive, and that was like a wrap-up, and that was it. No more was heard about the Escort, and honestly, it wasn't such a great car to begin with, but you still find remnants of the Escort in current Mahindra vehicles, like the window winder switches. Those have been derived from the Escort. I remember even the roof switch, the interior light switch, that was continued from the Escort. So bits and pieces, you will still find it around in Mahindra vehicles, but this is where the Ford India story began good and proper. Ford really came on song with the Icon, which we had in the first part, and now we're going to start this second part with the Mustang. Dollars, that's all that I want. I need a bag full of it in the trunk. Give me plenty, I can't get enough. We will always be thankful to Ford for giving us the muscle car. The full fat 5-liter V8 Mustang GT. Now, of course, all Mustangs did not sound like this. This has got a Borla exhaust on it, so that's why it's sounding this way. But a lot of the owners, they all love it. Some have even put Roush supercharger kits on this. Sounds insane. And this is one of those few fast cars that is usable on an everyday basis. The ride quality is actually pretty good. It is a hooligan car when you want it to, but it's also such a cool car. Nothing puts a smile on your face like these muscle cars. Now, a quick note on this generation of the Mustang. So, this was the first to actually be offered in right-hand drive. Earlier, all the Mustangs were not offered in right-hand drive. So that's why this could come to India, because it had right-hand drive. This was the very first generation of the Mustang with an independent rear suspension. Otherwise, all the earlier generations had a solid live axle, which meant before this, the Mustang went super fast in a straight line. Only with this generation did the Mustang actually go around corners. But did it go around corners like a fast German car, for instance? No chance. So Ford, they did the launch for the Mustang at the BIC. I remember I was driving the first car. Bertie from Overdrive, he was driving the second car, and we were both gunning it. Sunny Sidhu was with me in my car. He was the instructor, and he knew how I could drive, so he let us drive. And in half a lap, the engine check light had come on because it was going through oil starvation. So the Mustang was never really a track car. Launching it at the track was a big mistake, at least for people who knew how to drive. But on the road, this is superb. This is a fast, comfortable car. I used to call this a fast Camry because look at this wide, comfortable seats. Nothing really has such wide accommodating seats, such a plush ride quality. Just so easy to cover long miles in, effortless. Okay, there is a bit of thirst that this 5-liter V8 engine has, 396 bhp in stock trim, though very few are left in stock trim. But accounting for the fact that it is a thirsty motor and you will have to stop often for fuel, apart from that, it's so easy to play around with this. This is not my car, so I'm not going to fool around with it. I'll get murdered out here and dumped in one of these quarries. But such an easy car to play around with. This has line lock. With line lock, you can do huge burnouts. Huge burnouts. Before the drag race, what they do, you can do that with this. In fact, we'll put up some footage that we have from the past. We'll put that over here. It's not good to mess around with somebody else's car. But I love this car. I really like this car. They priced this well. It was 65 lakhs, I think around 85 on road. So it was well priced. It was the most affordable sports car that you could buy in the country. And that's why a lot of people really wanted the car, except Ford did what Ford did very often. And that was make some huge blunders. So what they did was only a few dealers in select cities could sell the Mustang. So even the owner of this Mustang, he had to buy his from Bombay. He was from Pune, but he had to buy his from Bombay because the Pune dealer was not allowed to sell it. So a lot of people were actually pissed off that they could not buy the Mustang in their city. Their dealers did not get allocation, which was nuts. There was a car that Ford had that had demand that people wanted to buy, but Ford would not sell it to them. How crazy is that? Of course, eventually Ford opened this up to all dealers, but then most of the interest in the Mustang had died out. Which is nuts. And honestly, that's a recurring theme in this whole series. Ford not doing justice to their own products. Ford not doing justice to their own engineers. Ford goofing up on those small little things which... How? Oh. Fuck, it's so easy to play around with this car, man. I really have to control myself. Stop it, Sirish. Too good. Thank you, Ford, for all the great cars. Seriously, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for all the great cars. We will miss you. No question about it. We will really miss you. The Mustang was not the only CBU Ford brought to India. Rewind back to 2002 when Ford introduced the Mondeo, what was till then the best handling car I had ever driven. It came at the time of the first gen Sonata, the W203 C-Class, the 6th gen Accord, the Opel Vectra, and this Ford, it drove rings around all of them. You could have it with a 143 bhp petrol or a 114 bhp diesel, and curiously, this is how you opened the bonnet. Swinging up the Ford logo and inserting the key into the slot. This Mondeo came at the height of Ford's prowess when it owned Volvo, Jaguar, Land Rover and Aston Martin, and the steering wheel was the same as that you would find in a Range Rover. It looks great even today and was a fantastic car in every respect except for the pricing. Nobody was ready to cough up 15.5 lakh rupees for the petrol or 16.9 lakh rupees for the diesel, even if that price bought you an in-dash 6 CD changer, a massive novelty back then. Nothing represented Ford's innovation spirit than the EcoSport. This, if you recall, was the very first compact SUV, the very first SUV under 4 meters in length, and this gave birth to the class that absolutely rocketed in terms of sales numbers. Ford, they had the first mover advantage and they really milked it. Those initial years, the EcoSport, there were lines outside Ford showrooms for people waiting to get inside, to check out the EcoSport, to book the EcoSport. There was a huge waiting period. Ford really did extremely well with the EcoSport. It was adapted from the Fiesta platform, obviously with raised ground clearance because you had to give it that SUV stance and proportions. That meant that it did not ride as well as the Fiesta because the dampers were a little taller. It was a little stiffer than the Fiesta, also to make sure that it went around corners. But it did not lose that Ford handling essence. This still drove well. It was still enthusiastic. Today, if you so much as hint at the EcoSport not handling as well as, say, a Nexon or an XUV 300 or even, God forbid, a Venue or a Sonnet, man, you're gonna get trolled. The Ford EcoSport army, the army of those handling enthusiasts of the EcoSport, oh man, they're really extremely vocal on social media, and not without reason, because this is still fun to drive. The steering, it really is a highlight on this SUV. It is direct, it's precise, it's eager. It really tells you what's going on. The EcoSport was launched in 2013 to tremendous response, but then after that, Ford never really worked on a full generation update on the EcoSport. There were facelifts. This is the last one that was sold. You can make out from the LED DRLs. Then just before Ford shut down operations, they introduced another facelift where they removed the spare wheel on the tailgate, gave a puncture repair kit, and that was really that. In fact, just before they shut down Indian operations completely, there was going to be a significant facelift on the EcoSport. We even had pictures of it on our social media handles, and then they shut shop and it was end of story. But they never really upgraded the EcoSport, and that's the reason why when Maruti brought out the Brezza and all the other compact SUVs came along, the EcoSport, it fell by the wayside because then it started to feel a little old in terms of the space inside, in terms of the infotainment, in terms of the equipment. Of course, this floating touchscreen that they introduced in 2017, I believe, that is nice. It still works well. It's got that sync system. In fact, Ford were one of the first to actually bring that SOS system on their cars, and it actually worked because when Ford did the media drives of the EcoSport in Goa, one of the EcoSports had an accident and they had to use the sync, and it worked. They realized that it actually does work. So these things actually do work in our situations. Ford was so ahead of the game. They not only came out with the first compact SUV, they also had that small 1-liter EcoBoost turbo petrol engine. Today, everybody's moving towards turbo petrols. But when the EcoSport was launched back then, they had an EcoBoost engine. But they just could not really push it. They couldn't actually push customers to spend a little bit more money for the EcoBoost engine. It also had a DCT twin clutch automatic gearbox. Imagine back in those days. Today everybody has that. Ford had it way back then, but they couldn't really bang on that success. Of course, Ford's strengths were their diesel engines. This is the 1.4 diesel engine. Even today, smooth, not very audible, good in terms of the power, excellent in terms of the fuel efficiency. It is still a fine engine. So that's the EcoSport for you. I think this was the defining Ford for years and years. Unfortunately, it was the only defining Ford. After the EcoSport, there was no real standout Ford. Of course, there was the new Endeavour, we will talk about that. There was also the Mustang, we will definitely talk about that. But as a mass volume vehicle, Ford did not have anything else after the EcoSport. For the EcoSport in 2004, Ford brought in the Fusion, arguably the very first compact SUV in India. Though the awkward styling meant this flopped big time. I ran a Fusion as my long-termer and loved the performance from the 1.6-liter engine. The handling was also tight, though that came at the expense of a stiff ride, and the space inside was extremely good for its footprint. But I always struggled to explain what this was. A hatchback, an SUV, a crossover, and that was the very reason that made it short-lived, unlike the beast we are going to drive next. Ford made great cars that handled well, and then Ford made these massive trucks that bullied everybody out of the way. This is the Endeavour line. It was launched in 2003, and unlike the cars which were developed in fits and starts, the Endeavour was continuously updated throughout its life cycle, and the Endeavour has been popular all through its life cycle. The Endeavour, when it was launched, it was this big, massive, butch, in-your-face thing based on the Everest and the Ranger 4x4. This had a proper ladder frame chassis. This was a beast. Did I say beast before? Well, I must say it again. This was an absolute beast. So launched in 2003. In 2007 came an update, and then this one was launched in 2009. And I actually have a lot of memories and a lot of experience with this one because my father-in-law, his daily driver used to be a 3-liter Endeavour. He used to go all over town in his Endeavour, up to the farm. In fact, the entire farmhouse was built because of all the back and forth in the Endeavour. And I think it did some 150,000 or almost 2 lakh kilometers before we finally sold it off. So my memories of it: great engine, lots of power, lots of torque, so effortless. Ride was not bad, and especially over bad roads it could take it actually quite well. But the handling, oh my god, the less said about the handling the better. Especially with the leaf springs at the rear, you had to be careful, and you couldn't do all the hooligan shit that we do, because if while sliding it caught something, it would go end over end. End over end in an Endeavour is not something you want to ever experience or even watch. I saw it once and that still horrifies me. So you had to be a little careful, but as a long distance cruiser, as a workhorse, this generation of the Endeavour was unbelievable. Now this one that I'm driving, this one has got a full Ironman suspension kit with a high lift kit. It's got an race dynamics ECU for more power. This is something that the owner, he really loves, and it shows. And of course, after having kitted it out with everything, and because this was the same Everest that was sold in the Southeast Asian markets, all of these parts are available easily. And now, having been spec'd and equipped for proper off-roading, it's a monster off-road. Forget that there's no Endeavour anymore, or there's no Ford anymore. I hate the fact that there are no big diesel engines anymore. Even big German luxury car manufacturers are putting 2-liter diesel engines, and for the time being. Very soon there won't be anything left in terms of diesel engines in them, which is a shame, because this is the joy. A very different joy from a sweet revving petrol engine, but a joy nevertheless. That grunt, that power, that low down bottom end. This generation of the Endeavour also came with a CD player and a VCD. It was called VCDs back then. So it had a VCD or a DVD player. So you could sit at the back and watch, I don't know, movies or whatever. Though with this little unsettled ride, I don't know what movies you could watch. But anyway, you had that option. Just look at the size of this thing. Oh my god. Imagine an Endeavour sticking around for the future when they will be all EVs, small little tiny EVs piddling around all over the place, and you have this big diesel gulping Endeavour come up in your rear view mirrors. For that reason alone, you should still keep Endeavours running, just to terrorize millennials when they eventually come out in their electric cars. So this generation was on sale till 2015, and then came the all-new Endeavour, which was significantly improved upon in every single aspect. This current generation Endeavour was launched in 2016. Of course, it's current generation now, but there is no Endeavour that is available now. And in fact, when Ford announced that they were pulling out of India, there was a mad rush for Endeavours, because this was amongst the most popular vehicles in Ford's range. And I think in this class, when you compare it especially with the Fortuner, this Endeavour was the nicer SUV, the nicer 4x4, the nicer overall thing to drive as well as to be driven around in. This was a complete update over the earlier generation Endeavour, the one that was pre-2016, and it had far better dynamics. Before this, the Endeavour, it had leaf springs at the back, and that could give it at times really hairy handling. I've seen some really bad incidents with Endeavours because of the leaf springs and the limitations of the leaf springs. Here, it was all sorted out, it was all cleaned up. So the ride quality improved tremendously. And where the Fortuner is always a little busy, this one over decent roads and even over bad roads, it is so much more settled, so much more planted, so much nicer to drive. And that's why you see so many of these Endeavours on the road. But truth be told, the excellence of the Endeavour should have resulted in far more Endeavours being sold. And again, it's just a case of Ford having a great product on their hands, but not being able to sell it enough. Why is the Fortuner the best seller in this class when the Endeavour has far better dynamics, is far more sorted? So when the Endeavour was launched, it was available with two engines, the 2.2 and the 3.2. This 3.2 litre 5-cylinder diesel engine made it to the 6-speed torque converter automatic gearbox. That's what we are driving, makes 197 bhp of power, and that's enough and more power to really cruise down Indian highways easily and fast and effortlessly. Just before BS6 engine norms kicked in, that's when Ford updated the Endeavour with the 2-litre diesel engine with the, wait for it, 10-speed automatic gearbox. That was 2-3 speeds too many. The Endeavour was always hunting for the right gear. It was too much. I was not a fan of that, to be honest. And of course, the main thing was it just did not have the performance of this 3.2. The effortlessness, the torque, the ease with which this generation of the Endeavour, it could really munch miles. The 2-litre engine just did not have that. And that's why, well, I don't think there were too many buyers for that. Though, that said, when Ford finally pulled the plug on Indian operations, there was a mad scramble for whatever Endeavours were left. Some of them got them at good prices. In fact, the owner of the Fiesta, the petrol automatic, he bought one of the last Endeavours and he got a 7 lakh discount on it. Obviously, he'll be thrilled. And now, if you ask me, Endeavours are going to hold value. Whatever drop was to happen, it has happened. And now Endeavours will hold value because now everybody sees the value and the worth in the Endeavour. This Endeavour is also so butch and macho and in your face. And then when you put that big bold Ford lettering on the grille and intimidate the whole world, pull yourself through everything. There's not one dud car or SUV behind me. There's not one that isn't dynamically sorted. Okay, maybe not the very first generation Endeavour, but even by the standards of the time and its class, it was actually sorted out. All of these, all are packaged well, all are affordable to run and to maintain. Even the Mustang owner of all people, he said that the Mustang is not expensive to own and run, and he's owned it right from day one. So Ford actually had everything sorted out. Then why isn't Ford in India anymore? Well, there are 1,000 theories and there's no point in me adding one more to the mix. But fact is that there is no Ford in the country today, and that is a crying shame.